Hi, everyone. My name's Adam Helfenbein. I'm a strategic solution architect on our solution engineering team. I've worked with many of our customers on their cloud transformation journey, focusing on application and infrastructure migration and modernization initiatives. Vanessa?
I'm Vanessa Jensen. I am the Cloud Economics Manager here at Insight. I lead our program where I specialize in licensing and cloud optimization. Our program does specialize within the AWS Cloud Readiness Program, as well as we support clients on their journeys from on-premise to cloud.
Thank you, Vanessa. And so welcome to today's webinar, where we'll be covering some of those tips and best practices for success as part of building that AWS directional business case. Before we continue, we want to cover today's agenda. We'll start off by discussing the various challenges organizations face related to technical debt and its associated business impact. We'll then dive into how leveraging public cloud service providers like AWS can help to alleviate some of those challenges. We'll discuss the broader AWS migration and modernization journey, where building a directional business case fits into that journey, and ultimately the best practices and tips for building one that's data-driven, facilitating better decision-making for migrations. And then we'll wrap up with Insight's AWS business case service offerings and share a few success stories from clients that have partnered with Insight. So starting with technical debt, how do we define technical debt? It's essentially the measure of the cost of reworking a solution caused by choosing an easy yet limited solution. So this is ultimately about trade-offs to meet near-term business needs and can derive from many different sources, such as software with monolithic code bases that are difficult to deploy, to test, and maintain, shortcuts to deployments that were functional but not quite optimal, and also stems from technology platform selections and architectural decisions, as well as lacking IT skill sets or essentially employee turnover over time. And even though the platforms and architectures that were initially selected may have been the best decisions at the time, making technical debt ultimately inevitable, but what is the long-term impact if that's not addressed appropriately over time? So when our annual Insight Commissioned Foundry survey was distributed to hundreds of senior IT leaders across industries, technical debt was the fastest growing roadblock to innovation from the year prior. So technical debt's a ubiquitous challenge across organizations, with 86% being impacted in the past year. And why does this matter? Ultimately, hindering the ability to innovate can result in businesses losing their competitive edge in rapidly changing industries. It's also impacting organizations' abilities to meet their SLAs as they suffer from outages and downtime, ultimately leading to poor customer experiences, potentially even loss of revenue, and decreased business productivity. So to mitigate these risks, organizations are starting to turn to public cloud service providers like AWS, not only to manage and tackle their technical debt, but to explore the broader opportunities to improve their business as a whole. And ultimately, we've seen technical debt jump from number 6 to the number 3 reason of inhibiting that innovation. So what else is driving organizations to move to public cloud, and why are they choosing AWS? Organizations often have many and varying drivers. Some are seeking ways to reduce their costs by moving from a CapEx to OpEx model. Others have upcoming co-location lease expirations and need to urgently exit their data center facilities, or want to avoid the complexity of capacity planning and costly hardware and licensing renewals, and are looking for ways to tackle their end of life or end of support platforms. Some of our other customers may be focused on seeking ways to accelerate innovation with increased business agility and tackle that technical debt that's precluding them from doing so. And others are looking for ways to improve the resiliency of their workloads and make it so that they can recover effectively from some of the many potential causes of service disruption. And for our customers, more often than not, it's ultimately a combination of these drivers that are leading them to start exploring public cloud as a viable option. One of the biggest pitfalls we see clients experience is failing to clearly define and document how their drivers, often technical, will map to prioritize business outcomes and fail to establish ways to iteratively measure that business value. So what are the associated inputs with turning these drivers into true business outcomes? This is ultimately represented by the cloud transformation value chain you see here, where we can combine our foundational capability with transformation domains such as technology to continue that downstream transformation. So starting with technology transformation, we're ultimately able to start maturing our processes, our organization, and ultimately our products. And just as an example of this, for technology, we might be referring to using AWS to migrate and modernize our legacy workloads. That can enable process transformation, such as having centralized data and analytics platforms in AWS that can improve our customer service experiences, or even enable better business forecasting through the use of machine learning. So having more targeted and personalized recommendations to our customers can help ultimately lead to a real business outcome of increased revenue. Another example of how some of our customers are achieving this is by moving to PaaS services, and their business outcome that they're really trying to achieve is to reduce their business risk and improve their vulnerability management posture by shifting responsibilities such as underlying OS management to cloud service providers like AWS. So ultimately, starting with the point of technology, using our foundational capabilities, it's important to really map this all to a desirable business outcome that we can iteratively measure and use metrics to ensure that these changes and transformations are really providing that business value that we're seeking. So how do we measure the business value of something like AWS? The Hackett Group's cloud services study performed a thorough survey and found definitive evidence that migrating to AWS actually resulted in improved staff productivity, improved operational resilience, as well as business agility. So ultimately, customers are starting to find, reductions in critical incidents. Their administrators are able to start managing more assets, and ultimately, their developers are starting to move more effectively and efficiently as they pursue innovation. And so when it comes to this overall value, not only are they seeing significant room and efficiency and agility, but they're trusting AWS as a market share leader in the public cloud infrastructure and platform services sector, especially seeking to capitalize on the over 100 availability zones that they have and over 32 geographic regions worldwide. So ultimately able to start mapping the true business value of the AWS platform. One of the more interesting findings as part of where the business value derives from public cloud and the use of AWS was that 90% of economic business value, according to IDC research, actually stemmed from non-TCO related drivers. So really looking at business productivity as the truly largest value that customers are deriving from a cloud transformation with AWS, but also seeing savings from IT infrastructure cost reductions as well. So interestingly enough, 90% of that value was non-TCO driven. So where does developing a business case take place within the broader migration and modernization journey? Ultimately, through initial assessment, we leverage rapid discovery and TCO reporting, as well as envisioning sessions and evaluating cloud migration readiness to start facilitating the development of that business case and really start to help with those data-driven decision-making components early on. So this can be for an entire application and infrastructure portfolio or even a subset of customer applications. So early on in the process is the best place to really start diving into creating that business case and giving us a go, no-go decision to really start mobilizing through the creation of our landing zones, to start ramping up our operating models and migrations, and ultimately our modernization of our applications. So the earlier we can establish the right business case with the right data, the smoother those subsequent phases will go. So what are some of the activities and best practices for building the business case itself? With this said, I'll go ahead and pass it to Vanessa to cover a little bit more detail about reductions in cost and how licensing can impact this journey. Vanessa?
Thank you, Adam. A majority of the clients, when are modernizing to the cloud, are looking for, is this going to save us money in this cloud journey versus our current position on premise to cloud? And the understanding how we build the practice and help you into understanding the assess phase, as well as getting to the inform and then eventually the migration, we build into the process and show the understandings of where the first format of savings always comes in. Going from on-premise to the cloud, it's on average 36% savings based off of the resource utilization, the optimization, and the new platforming that's provided in the process. The other highlight that is not always a forefront thought is your licensing. Your current Windows Server, your SQL Server licensing plays and contributes to how your on-premise data center has been built. When you're moving it into the cloud, there's potential for consolidation and optimization, not only in the utilization of the servers, but also within its licensing. So as you'll see here, 77% of Windows Server license savings. Because of the format of the license included and dedicated options we build and can transform for you, we give you a multi-layer scenario of what is going to be the best format, as well as looking at the other alternatives if you can reduce and how you can do it per our suggestions, and with our architects on our best practice forms. For the SQL Server licensing, depending on how you want to bring the license to the cloud, the savings potential could be broadened for not only a whole data center, but by VM.
So what are some of the best practices for building the directional business case? Ultimately, this starts with identifying the desired business drivers and outcomes and ensuring that we prioritize them to guide the cloud transformation. We subsequently take those drivers and desired outcomes and start mapping them to technical guiding principles. And these technical guiding principles are going to help with defining our high-level migration strategies early on in the process. For example, if our business driver was to accelerate innovation and our desired business outcome was we wanted to increase business agility and grow our company's revenue, this could be measured by the frequency that we're performing deployments, how frequently we're releasing new features, and ultimately how satisfied our customers are with our services or products. And the technical guiding principle for this journey might be for us to start refactoring our applications to use microservices and DevOps operating models, and really increasing the speed at which new features can be deployed through our business. In some cases, customers might have an urgent data center exit strategy to accomplish in the next few months or even under a year, and the true desired business outcome might be a successful, timely exit to get out of that facility. This can be measured by the speed and quantity of the number of servers that we're migrating, and in this case, our technical building principle might be designated as the use of rehost migration methods, or even relocate by using something like VMware Cloud on AWS. So really to identify and prioritize those business outcomes early on, really ultimately lead that technical strategy for how we proceed with the migration plan. After we've prioritized our drivers and started to map them to our technical guiding principles, we start looking at rapid IT portfolio discovery that really starts shaping the economics behind the business case. So we take a look at what client data sources are available and ultimately that data fidelity. In other words, this is the degree to which the data that we're collecting can actually be trusted to be reliable and accurate. Companies may have data sources such as CMDBs, vCenter exports or knowledge bases, maybe even application inventories, and you want to start assigning how much portfolio coverage those data sources have and really assign a fidelity level. So in the example of using something like a VMware vCenter export, that might have a higher data fidelity level than, say, a CMDB that's infrequently updated or comprised of many varying sources. So understanding, what data source is readily available and how much it can be trusted can really help feed into identification of the gaps that we need to solve for and how well we can use that data to provide our business case. Also, we incorporate those existing client data sources with existing data collection, where we start to use tool sets such as AWS Migration Evaluator to really do this from an automated discovery perspective. This enables us to scan things like our x86 server architecture and really start to get an understanding of how utilized and optimized our resources are at current state, what instance types that might map to at the AWS side, and ultimately by providing a combination of the existing client data sources and automated tooling, we really start to form the TCO directional business case. So with the TCO report, this is essentially comparing the as-is infrastructure landscape with a post-migration AWS service architecture. This comparison is going to start illustrating the expected run rates for given workloads in AWS, and is typically a comparison of the infrastructure costs between, say, on-prem or even a separate cloud service provider, as well as to map that to AWS. And then, so as the TCO is starting to shape our overall directional business case, giving us that cost comparison, the other component to really understanding the true business case is understanding how ready we are from an organization perspective to actually handle this migration. So within a one-day workshop through a migration readiness assessment, we can start to baseline an understanding of this readiness, where an organization really is in their cloud journey today, and start to develop a definitive action plan to resolve any known gaps so that that migration can be executed at scale in a much more seamless fashion. So what are some of Insight's offerings and AWS client success stories that we can leverage to start tackling the creation of this business case? Vanessa, did you want to cover our OLA?
Yes, thank you. Our optimization and license assessment, or OLA as we do call it, is one of our fully funded programs by AWS. It's where our Insight Cloud Economics program delivers the offering. What we like to do is call it the assess phase. It's part of the cloud journey where we want to identify what your current on-premise utilization is showing, where we can identify the consumption, mimic and cost save, where the license situation can build and form for your Windows Server, your SQL Server, but also helping understand how can we make the license flexibility to show the overall cost savings for that TCO. When we're diving into the OLA program specifically, it is part of the cloud readiness, as you already did mention, Adam. One of the other components is how do we utilize that licensing in the cloud to its best benefit? And what we normally call that is bring your own license. And with the bring your own license savings and potential, we're seeing our clients save, as we formerly saw, 46% in SQL savings, 77% in Windows Server savings, and that comes down to that licensing side. So we do concentrate heavily on what can we mix into that flexibility of looking at the cost scenarios, creating multiple workbook scenarios for your cost efficiency in the cloud journey. If you can implement a license included or bringing that license to the cloud situation to make sure what we're analyzing is going to be that plan of where you can actually migrate. Within the different scenarios, we do see that it's going to be what we call like a proof of concept, a business value review for that building case to formally make the cloud journey into the migration part. What we like to understand and determine is what to move and how to move it, also coupled with that cost and license situation. So it is a weighing of the pros and cons of putting the virtual machines in the cloud and how to optimize them to its best fit. The next part of what we like to review is the actual migration assessment. So as we'll see here, it is called the MAP program. Adam, do you want to describe that further?
Absolutely. So in addition to OLA being a fully funded program, the AWS MAP program for the assess phase also provides funding for partners like Insight to assist our customers to document those business drivers and outcomes, and really be a thought leader to start gathering the data sources to help develop that business case and assess that migration readiness. So through the MAP Assess program, it's a little bit more of an in-depth effort to really gain a true understanding of that data source and fidelity level across the landscape, start to highlight gaps and remediations of how we're going to close any potential data gaps and in the customer's existing inventory. Similarly to the OLA, we're also providing migration evaluator or third-party tooling to scan the infrastructure. But this builds on the OLA one step further by really starting to perform a migration readiness assessment across different functional areas, such as security and compliance, disaster recovery, and really start to understand the available processes and architectures and standards that are available in an organization, and how we can start planning for a mobilized phase to really start ramping up the migration program. So both of these are excellent funded programs that Insight and AWS go to market with together to help our customers prepare for migration and understand if the directional business case is going to enable them to move forward. So just an example of what this directional business case might look like. This is an example of a customer with a subset of servers where the migration evaluator was leveraged. So in addition to understanding the OS counts and which one of these servers have different OS breakdowns in our desktops, it also helps to identify right-size server configurations and identify zombie servers that could potentially be decommissioned. So a lot of value in itself to really just understand how utilized these servers are, and then to really start to map that infrastructure to the various procurement options of running these servers and infrastructure on AWS as a whole for their server storage and network components. So as you can see on the right, there's a lot of options that can be compared and contrasted with respect to, say, on demand versus 3-year, no upfront reserved, and even breaking it down further into how does bringing your own license versus leveraging AWS provided license impact the overall TCO. So really granular detail that can be provided in a rapid amount of time to help construct this business case. So why partner with Insight to ultimately deliver the AWS directional business case? Insight's essentially a global AWS advanced tier services partner that holds a variety of competencies from migration, security, and DevOps. And ultimately, we have packaged services for these directional business case efforts that enable us to rapidly perform the business case and even move forward into the development of landing zones and migration solutions. We help customers at all phases of their cloud journey, from those that are greenfield to those that have been there for over a decade plus and are looking for ways to optimize their applications and infrastructure, and have a variety of different certification on staff, of staff and engineers and consultants that can work across a variety of domains, whether that be from machine learning to infrastructure to app modernization. What really enables Insight to have a true success with our customers is the AWS Center of Excellence and the breadth of capabilities we have across the board, from AWS business development managers and cloud success managers that can help provide cost recommendations to our clients, as well as pre-sales architects that can assist all the way through delivery, working to deliver solutions with our customers. So we have a really wide scale of excellence across the entire board within our AWS COE that enables our customers to be successful. One thing that I also think that really differentiates us is our global presence and our intimate familiarity with a variety of the vendor landscape partners. So many customers are looking for evaluating use of AWS and native services versus bringing third party that they can procure for the marketplace. Insight has deep vendor partnerships across the entire ecosystem, and that enables us to help facilitate decisions of how they can best run their solutions and what technology selections to make on the AWS platform. So what are some examples of clients that have partnered with Insight ultimately to develop their directional business cases? And one example, there was a global hearing device producer that used the AWS MAP program and associated funding to start vacating their multiple data centers. So essentially, they needed to exit European data centers with tight deadlines and needed to be concerned about potentially targeting their PII data. And they wanted to see what it might look like to create a directional business case to migrate that estate to a US region where they already have an initial presence. So looking at the MAP program, we're able to assess the existing infrastructure and applications, start to develop a TCO model through the automated discovery that we provided, and give them a compare and contrast of the existing on-prem footprint versus what an optimized infrastructure looked like in that US region. And also through the MAP program, by gathering security and compliance requirements, we're able to start delineating what components may be subject to GDPR requirements versus things that can easily move to the United States. So ultimately, with the successful completion of that assessment, the client's got a firm understanding of the data involved with respect to their run rate in AWS, and subsequent fundings available to help them continue that migration to close out that European data center. So ultimately, a lot of customers are looking to understand, what are our options and how much is that going to cost us, right? Similarly, a global mining company wanted to start tapping into an OpEx model for cloud native. They're a global mining company with many remote sites across the globe, and they wanted to see if AWS was a viable option for them to start taking advantage of AWS's robust network infrastructure and using their backbone to quickly ramp up to edge locations with their mining sites. So they were able to use Global Accelerator and implement a POC with Insight, as well as AWS Control Tower, to set up a best practices environment from the get-go and start working through a POC to do performance testing, ultimately finding satisfaction and results in their ability to leverage AWS network and increase their performance as a whole. So this success enabled them to start migrating remote sites and eliminate the need for costly infrastructure renewals. In other use cases, we've worked with many other customers to do full cycle migrations, starting from the map assess phase all the way through the migration phase, where we were able to migrate and bundle workloads for migration, migrating hundreds of servers while mitigating downtime. But regardless, this all starts with creating that directional business case so that clients have the best information to essentially make their decisions on if they want to move forward with migration and how they can do so. So what are some of the next steps to engage with the Insight team? You can connect with the Insight team at awsteam@insight.com, or even scan the code below to learn more about our Insight's OLA and migration capabilities. Thank you.